I'd like to welcome you to this instalment, the July instalment of the AeroPM Learning Together session. These are always well attended, and we've always got really interesting presentations that are central to the work that defence industry is doing right now, both for those above and below the line, those tiptoeing on the line. And today's instalment should be no exception. We see at AeroPM view this as a vital opportunity to be able to share the knowledge that our senior professionals have gathered through their service career and share that with as many others as possible. This session is being recorded, and hopefully you've seen the opportunity to acknowledge that. If this is not to your liking, then let us know in the comments section and we'll find a way around that. Principally, the reason that we do this is to be able to share it with an audience that couldn't make it for this specific session naturally. My name's Peter Nugent. I'm the head of capture and delivery at AeroPM, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome Dave Bywater, one of our senior engineering professionals at AeroPM. Dave's got 20 years, in excess of 20 years within the Royal Australian Air Force, and more recently during that career has been the Deputy Director at SR-SPO, in charge of sustainment of the P8 Poseidon, and also had engineering tours at ALS LMU, the Aeronautical Life Support Logistics Management Unit. So, Dave, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here today and thank you for sharing your time. We're going to be able to take questions as we go and look forward to being able to share what I hope will be a really interesting conversation and a convivial one as well. So, Dave, over to you.
Thanks very much, Pete. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us today for our July Learning Together session. For those who don't know me, my name is Dave Bywater, and I'm a senior consultant at AeroPM Professional Services. And I'm very fortunate and very pleased to have been asked to share some experiences with you today, noting that on the call we have a range of participants from within defence, but also as member of defence industry. So thank you for taking the time and the interest to dial in. For today's session, what I'm looking to do is to draw upon in particular, my very recent experience working in some very complex sustainment organisations and walking through the journey of reform from what CASG typically used to do in the past, which was manage and deliver transactional type activities for sustainment programs, and then transitioning that based upon the first principles review to planning, governance and assurance. So I hope you enjoy the session, and by all means, as we go, you'll probably see that I ask some questions from time to time, but by all means, if you've got any burning questions that you think are worthy of drilling into, please raise them as we go, or type them into your text field and we'll see if we can address those. So before I go any further though, you probably would do well to learn a little bit about the guy who's talking to you down the Zoom call. But my journey to becoming a consultant has many contributing elements. And those elements for me are my two awesome young boys. So I'm the father of two boys, Hudson and Lincoln. I'm also happily married to my wife, Mel, and she's works in Air Force as an environmental health officer. And we met in the services, and you'll see there that I've got an extensive career, and following Pete's words, as an aerospace engineer in Air Force. So we've certainly got blue in our blood in our family. And when I made the decision to step sideways into consultancy, I found that not only was that wealth of experience a good fit for my new role, but it also sets a fantastic foundation for the work that I'm now performing with AeroPM. So the scope for this afternoon, what I'm looking to do is to take a very quick journey from first principles review and the reform that has driven, and have a look at how planning, governance and assurance needs to take place in a contemporary sustainment enterprise. And in particular, I want to have a look at how industry plays such a fundamental role in an empowered sense as a part of that, that enterprise model. Now, I will contextualise the discussions this afternoon around my recent experience, which is about 4.5 years worth of my recent career. And the first bit is the CAF-35 P-8 maritime patrol aircraft. Now, this is a relatively new and maturing fixed wing platform. It uses and employs a very contemporary through life support model with an industry steward. And that's also complemented by a cooperative program with the United States Navy. So a very complex sustainment arrangement, but an arrangement that is delivering some terrific results for defence. I'd also like to draw upon my experience with CAF-27. So that's the ADF Common Aeronautical Life Support Equipment Program. Now, that program looks after a wealth of equipment across 18 aviation platforms with 7 capability managers across 3 services. So very complex stakeholder interactions. And I was very fortunate to be in these 2 programs at the right time when they're embarking upon that reform journey into planning, governance and assurance. Now, before I do go any further, just a few quick disclaimers. First and foremost, the opinions that I express are those of my own, and I acknowledge that they may not be the opinions of the Department of Defence. But also, I want to keep the presentation void of any commercial sensitivities or practices. I worked very closely with a number of industry partners, and this afternoon is not about identifying processes or people within commercial enterprise. It's all about taking some really good lessons learnt that can be used across other programs within CASG to the benefit of those on the call. So before we kick off, if I could just ask a quick question of those on the call. Is anyone not familiar with the first principles review and recent reform that's occurred within defence? Probably the easiest way I could get is probably a show of hands in the text field. And Peter, if I could kindly get you to monitor that for me, that'd be fantastic.
Sure, mate. Looking now.
Thanks.
Just the one thumbs up there for Emma B.
Excellent. Thanks, Emma. So with that, look, I'll make the assumption that broadly speaking, everyone on the call would have an elementary understanding at least of first principles review. But I will start with some real basic just to bring Emma in. So a very ambitious reform journey commenced probably about 5 or 6 years ago now with the commencement of the first principles review. And that review of defence practices and structures really pointed out for CASG that CASG shouldn't be doing for itself what industry can provide to defence. And with that, industry needs to be recognised as a fundamental input to capability and as a partner to help defence achieve its strategic outcomes, but also provide a domestic sovereign capability for sustainment. The great thing about that is that allows CASG to refocus its resources into a swathe of acquisition programs that are coming down the investment pipeline. So on this next slide here, this is what's known as the Capability Acquisition and Sustainment Enterprise Model. Now, I won't go into the mechanics of the design of that model. But what I have done is I've superimposed on that some key views from my experience that I'd like to draw upon through the lessons and the opportunities that follow in the coming slides. So firstly, starting with capability planning, which occurs between CASG and the capability manager. Now, it's not an uncommon statement to hear a capability manager say to CASG, what's this capability planning business that you speak of? Capability planning is my role. That's what I do. And that view is certainly valid, but it's not the entire picture, because CASG and the Sustainment SPO have an obligation to manage strategic planning and operational planning for their sustainment spend through DMFP, and the various opportunities to grow and expand the capability that will serve the capability manager over up to a 10-year outlook. Program governance. Now, governance for some can be a dirty word, because governance for many, the first thing that comes to mind is managing a contract. And certainly at a high level, that's what a SPO does, between providing oversight of industry and industry's delivery of a capability to the capability manager. But for me, governance is really about enabling the relationship. And CASG does that by setting the right conditions, the right climate, the right organisational structures and processes to allow industry to do their job and to deliver optimised capability for the capability manager. And at the bottom of that diagram, you'll see the assurance piece, which is the here and the now. Now, assurance is providing that justified confidence based on objective evidence that the capability manager is getting what they expect, and that taxpayers' dollars are being expended appropriately in the process. Now, that assurance, which is the responsibility of the SPO, ideally is a risk-based process, and an extensive program of work that is undertaken through the deliberate design of organisational structure and work packages for the staff within that environment to deal with on a daily basis, to provide that picture of risk, issue and opportunity within a sustainment enterprise. Now, through the following slides, you may hear me from time to time speak of the concept of stewardship. Now, back in April, Michael Wiggins, one of our consultants, spoke of stewardship in the Learning Together session. I won't go over what he spoke about in detail, but I would like to point out with regards to stewardship, because stewardship is about behaviours and about collaboration between industry and the capability manager. Stewardship for me is very much a spectrum. It's not an end state, and stewardship is a journey. And there are two ends on that spectrum. There's stewardship at one end, and there's agency theory and effectively, colloquially, managing contracts at the other. And those two ends are in constant tension, but the tensions can be managed, and they are managed through the governance functions of the SPO to develop the right processes and systems to enable industry to deliver for industry. The other thing I mentioned about stewardship is I really believe that it's not just industry's problem to deliver steward-like behaviours and a stewardship model. I really believe it's incumbent on everyone in that enterprise diagram to contribute to cultural change. I think it's unfair in many instances that industry is expected to be a steward out of the box. To be a steward requires some robust relationships and some organisational functionality to support them. So very much everyone needs to be on board. I'd probably like to raise a question on this point here. So is there anyone on the call that would like to share an example where they've seen industry act as a true part of an enterprise, where they've been empowered by a SPO to support a capability manager? Has anyone got examples where that's been seen as a good thing and an effective thing that they'd like to share? We'll just wait for any texts to come through as well on the text feed.
Hey, it's Emily. Hi. I think going back to early days, my early days in my career, back when I was part of MP SPO, there was a really great relationship and enterprise arrangement with, at the time, it was Tenix and Australian Aerospace, and that was really run very much in an enterprise manner in the early days.
Fantastic. Thanks for that contribution, Emily.
I was going to offer the P3 Accord, which I think probably build upon that relationship that Em's talking about downstream between the Commonwealth, Airbus and the capability manager. Is that an example that you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's excellent. Look, sorry, jump in, Emily.
No, sorry, I was just confirming. Yes, that was the one.
And Jo's thrown in that in her previous role with ALSPO, platform stewardship was a well-known principle that was managed well.
Fantastic. And I really believe in, I guess, a common theme across those responses there is relationship and having a relationship at many levels, which a common theme is building trust, and that trust to deliver and the trust to step up and perform in challenging circumstances. So I'll move on to...
I thought I might just add that stewardship, can you hear me?
Yes, Joanne.
Stewardship works really well when you treat it as a true steward. I've seen people and I've seen contracts try and use stewardship as a principle that means that the contractor has to do everything for nothing. And if you apply that principle, it's going to fail in all circumstances. A principle we used at ALSPO was, I know it's a really bad analogy, but it's a really effective one. You treat a platform steward is like a real estate agent looking after your property. You empower them to make the decisions and execute them on your behalf, and they only come to you with the big stuff, or if there's going to be a cost involved or a schedule change that's significant. So they're very different principles to an expectation that the contractor just does more.
Yeah, that's some excellent points, Joanne. And I'm hoping in the slides that I provide following this that I kind of explore some similar examples as well, and how that climate can actually be supported to bring that out, to allow industry to do what they're paid to do and to do well. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll step through a number of challenges just based on my experience. And those challenges go from actually building a sustainment enterprise through to the actual ongoing functionality of the enterprise. And the first one is identifying a value proposition. And I'd just like a disclaimer here. I really want to acknowledge the outstanding work of a colleague of mine, Group Captain Ronnie Corbett, and Doug Phillips, who I worked with on the CAF 35 program, and they did some fantastic work in building these value propositions for the P8 program prior to undergoing that reform journey for the organisation. So a key question that they faced and that I observed as well was with industry expected to stand up and deliver stewardship and support the capability manager, the question gets asked from many fronts. Well, what does the SPO do in that instance? What is the reason that the SPO now exists? Now, my view on that is sustainment management must identify its value proposition and its reason for being. And only once you understand what that is, should you then look to remodel your processes, your systems, and build a culture that empowers industry to deliver their services to the capability manager. Now, that value proposition is actually your competitive advantage in essence. Noting that it is a competitive advantage, that's where your knowledge and resources should be applied in order to deliver those and to deliver them exceptionally. So just to run through very quickly, these are the 5 value propositions that were identified on the P8 program. So ensuring dynamic service delivery at the top of the list. This is all about having an agile set of processes and forums that enable decision-making to support changes in the capability manager's priorities. So sustainment is not static, and the operating environment that capabilities face do evolve. And it's about being responsive to that cause. The second one is about establishing and maintaining boundaries. Now, having the right models and structures and management framework means that people know exactly where they can and cannot operate, and that builds respect and understanding within the enterprise. Value for money, a Commonwealth function, and a lot of value for money issues must remain with the Commonwealth because of the statutory requirements around VFM. So that is certainly something that ASPO should work to understand and to support industry to understand exactly where the boundaries are for say, commercial and say, purchasing decisions. Monitoring and retiring strategic sustainment risks. Bit of a tongue twister there. Through a robust risk-based assurance program, you should be able to drive resolution for risks, issues, and opportunities that are impacting the front end of the business, which is those delivery of services that the capability manager needs. And at the bottom of the list, by no means any less important than the others, it's accountability. And making sure that there's accountability not only on actions, but on behaviours and decisions. And I believe, and from my experience, accountability works if the SPO takes ownership within the enterprise to lead those accountability discussions and to act as a bit of a mediator when it comes to differences of perspective between capability manager and industry.
Dave, if you don't mind,
yes, please.
You go back to that slide.
Absolutely.
If I was to play devil's advocate for a moment, and you talked about the three different parties coming together here, and these have been apportioned to the Sustainment Agency or CASG, is there any reason why those five can't be broken between the other two? I imagine value for money would be retained by the capability manager. Stakeholders accountable could be on the capability manager side, but monitoring, retiring strategic sustainment risks, potentially that could be rest with industry as well.
Oh, absolutely. The accountability and strategic sustainment risks in particular can and often do rest with industry. I think with having CASG take a lead role in those spaces, I guess it adds balance between the relationship of three. And that it actually acts to support industry to work more effectively with the capability manager, because the capability manager will always have their particular focus and their particular priority, but their business is not necessarily understanding the financial implications or the contractual implications that are necessary to support their capabilities on the front line. So in essence, the SPO acts as a steward for those very value-adding principles, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Pete?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to. It's just the way we've always done it. So not from through a stewardship lens, but I'm just trying to think of genuine reasons why that sustainment organisation must, those functions must be held by a sustainment organisation as opposed to the other two.
Yeah, and there's certainly there's a lot of discussion that can be had certainly around the even the value for money piece and service delivery. Service delivery sounds like a very industry biased value proposition because they are at the front line in dealing with the capability manager. But in working through these, I think the important thing is every enterprise that is established will need to contextualize their value proposition to the situation that they're in. And by no means would I think that these 5 principles that are used on P8, for instance, would be just as valid on any number of, say, land or maritime or even other air programs. Okay. All right, what we'll do, thanks for that, Peter. What we'll do is I'll move on to the next slide just to keep things going to time. So the second challenge that I faced, and on both programs I faced this very early on, is having incongruent and incomplete guidance. So when it comes to the reform journey in terms of designing what your sustainment organisation needs to look like, I found very early on that CASG across the domains has some really good strategic level doctrine. It's very outcome focused, which is great because that allows you to contextualize things to your specific circumstance. On the flip side of the coin, though, is there are a number of tools and techniques that are openly available to help you design your structures and the focus of your work packages. But when you bring those together, they don't necessarily agree with each other. And in bringing them together to give you an answer, you will still find, more often than not, that you'll have gaps in the analysis. You'll have gaps in terms of not covering the full suite of planning, governance, and assurance tasks. You may also have disagreement in terms of the number of FTE you require and the different skill levels you require from, say, your military and your APS staff to be able to deliver those planning and governance services. So I see this impacting programs in two ways. So the first way, this is difficult work, and that difficult work takes time, and that can breed uncertainty in your sustainment program. And that uncertainty can impact industry as the SPO goes through this reform journey. And you'll see with this reform underway, there may be a lack of strategic guidance or support, which can lead to behaviours that see industry potentially playing it safe or really just focusing on what the minimum requirements of the contract are. That's certainly one area of concern. The other area of concern with the guidance that's available across CASG is the doctrine doesn't go into too much depth about leadership and mentoring industry. Now, there's a huge amount of focus on reforming the SPO, but I believe that supporting industry to reform to an enterprise model, the doctrine and guidance around that is somewhat lacking. And that can impact industry's ability to build their own systems and processes in a way that meet CASG's expectations, but also provide optimal sustainment outcomes for the capability manager. Now, the third challenge is certainly related to the previous one, and this is about translating your strategy into tactical doctrine. So the best efforts that you have in your organisation to deliver a planning, govern and assure construct won't mean much if the people that are working for you can't come to work and understand exactly what it is that they're meant to be doing. And I'd like to use an example that I lived on both programs, where I had a number of staff approach me and work with me and have discussions along the lines of, I used to know what we used to do in doing transactional activities. I used to know that we deliver engineering, logistics and configuration management. Now I'm doing planning, governance and assurance, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is I'm doing when I come to work. And that's actually quite a pretty powerful statement, and it hits pretty hard when you hear that, because it makes you need to really think about the journey that you're on and whether you're actually hitting the right mark. And it makes you think about how you could be doing things better and testing and adjust your reform journey as you go. From my experience, putting planning, governance and assurance activities into a duty statement is really tricky. The reason being is those tasks are quite radically different to what we would typically do, those tasks that are transactional in nature. The tasks also require very different skill sets. And members within a SPO organisation may not have those skills organically. So you may find that you have many gaps, and those gaps need to be addressed through potentially training, potentially remodelling of positions and how your structure works. It may also lead to challenging conversations where a SPO who wants to embrace plan, govern and assure type activities may need to decide whether the current personnel footprint and the type of people that they have is actually appropriate for the business that they need to deliver moving forward. So very much a challenge when trying to go from the strategic intent through to delivering a statement to your individual staff and supporting them along that change journey. With that, I'd like to ask another question, either from people who are from CASG or from defence industry. Have you seen examples where a SPO, for instance, has not understood planning and governance following first principles reform? And what has that meant for that sustainment enterprise? What sort of outcomes have fallen out from that lack of understanding. Any text messages come through, Peter?
None that I can see. I think no one really wants to rag on their former unit.
Oh, that's okay. I understand. It's a challenging discussion. But what I can do, the next few challenges might help elicit some further discussion in this space. So what we might do is we'll continue on. Challenge number 4, industry maturity. Now, I mean industry maturity from the perspective of adopting an enterprise mindset. Now, industry, in all the various sustainment programs I've worked in and observed, industry does listen, learn and adapt really well. If the Commonwealth is proper in articulating its need and its expectations. I think CASG from time to time tend to forget that industry being enthusiastic to support the Commonwealth's need is subtly different to industry actually understanding what the expectation of the Commonwealth is. Now, I see industry maturity working in one of 2 ways, and I've got tangible examples where I've seen both of these methods, and I'll step through those. The first example is where industry may have a knowledge or expectation deficit compared to the SPO. They might not have worked in an enterprise before, and they might not understand the SPO's expectation for sustainment. Now, when you have a situation like that, you may see that CASG has a negative perception of industry, and the industry is not stepping up to the plate and is not embracing steward behaviours. That in turn leads to a lack of trust, and then you may find yourself in the unfortunate situation where CASG actually start holding on to activities that industry should be doing. And that creates a lot of frustration in industry because they know and feel that they're empowered and able to deliver these services. And in instances like that, when a contract gets pulled out and people are referring to line items in a contract, that's a very difficult place to recover from. On the other flip side, you may actually have industry in an enterprise that have the upper hand, and through experience on other platforms, other programs, and with other defence partners globally, they actually understand stewardship and an enterprise approach really well. And their proactive nature in getting out and forging relationships and optimising sustainment may tread on the toes of CASG, who may not expect that. And CASG might have the perception that industry stepping outside of their swim lane. Now, whichever of these 2 competing ideals that you have, there are tensions there, and in my view, the tensions either way have to be resolved, and they're only resolved through relationship building. Writing expectations into a contract typically doesn't get you very far. And the gap needs to be closed through education, through relationship building, and then the SPO itself setting the right conditions for the enterprise to function appropriately. So you've got that industry steward being able to step up and to do so knowing that the SPO has their back, so to speak. Now, while we're on the topic of trust, the 5th challenge I'd like to raise is risk-based assurance. And a good assurance program will assist you in establishing trust between the enterprise parties. Now, taking an integrated approach to risk assurance, such as the model that I've depicted on the screen here, this sets a really positive foundation if you look to develop and exploit an integrated product management program for your capability. And certainly standards like ISO 55001, which is a globally recognized standard for asset management, works really well when you employ integrated forums and decision-making frameworks, such as the example that's on the screen. Now, this example is really just a collection of the good bits that I've seen from various other programs. So it doesn't necessarily represent any single model, but from what I've seen, it can work very effectively. So in this model, you'll have at a SPO level a routine battle rhythm of assurance activities that are undertaken to identify those risks, issues and opportunities in your sustainment program. That information is then passed through a range of enterprise forums at different executive levels with different levels of authority for decision making, where those risks, issues and opportunities can be effectively managed. Now, the key element of those forums is having industry not only having a seat in the forums, but taking a lead role in many instances. And as a steward, as a member of the enterprise looking to promote an optimized sustainment outcome, it's really important to have industry working as one of the key leaders in those forums, because they'll be owning the outcomes of those decisions in terms of how they get translated into delivering sustainment services. Now, looking at what the SPO does, a common question that I've faced in my time on the last 2 programs is, what is this assurance task that you talk about? What does the SPO actually assure? And there's actually a range of different methods you can employ to identify what those tasks are. You can quite effectively, for instance, use bow tie models to understand risk across your program and look at control measures. You can also get some good value working with the capability manager and understanding what their risk management framework is. Because ideally, if you're working to mitigate the same risks, then your capability overall is going to be in a far better position, and you'll find yourselves talking a common language. Another element that I found very useful myself was looking at independent assurance reviews, and these are done in both sustainment and acquisition. But there's some fantastic high-level expectations there that can be broken down into a more transactional level that would be applicable at a SPO level, conducting assurance over a contract with industry. So in short, there is a range of known and less known opportunities to have a look at identifying the right assurance tasks for your context on your program.
Dave, is there anything that you would hold back industry from then? Or do you think it's just open kimono in the tent for everything?
I certainly, from my experience, having industry proactively in the tent up to that middle leadership team level, if you've got a good sustainment program, of which I've been a part of 2 very good ones previously, the need to have industry lead at the steering committee level is probably been minimal. It's really that 05, 06 level where I think the tangible gains are in having industry present a position and prosecute a case for a decision to be made.
So we're talking about SAR, DMFP, smart buyer.
That's right. And then if by extension, if you look at integrated product management forums, if you're employing an asset management construct, leading those key functional forums. Now, the 6th and final challenge is it's straightforward, but it's not. It sounds straightforward. It's keeping the capability manager engaged. Now, all the internal reform that CASG can do to build an organisation doesn't mean much at all if the customer, the capability manager, is not brought along for the journey. And there's a number of issues that I've observed in my time, not only on my 2 previous programs, but ones prior to that as well. Potentially confusion from the capability manager about who they need to engage. Do they engage industry or the SPO for a various issue? Where are the boundaries? And are those boundaries rank-based? Are they functional-based? And at what point do they need to elevate something to the SPO's attention? These are all very valid and important questions, and not setting the expectation early for those questions can create a lot of uncertainty. Very important to keep the capability manager front of mind when going through any reform journey, and ensuring that within the capability manager's organisation, that you work hard to find a champion, if you will, who works in the capability manager, who can pull your change journey into the capability manager space and work with you to support in building the case for change and that sense of urgency for change. So noting those challenges that I've listed, I've had to think about what are the I guess the low-hanging fruit. If I were to go through this again in reforming an organisation, where would I recommend people to apply their effort first and foremost, I guess, to get that bang for buck? So I've come up with 4 opportunities that I think a large number of sustainment programs would benefit from. And the first one I've selected is change management. And the premise that I put forward is change management is not a byproduct of your organisational reform. Your organisational reform is the byproduct of your change management. Now, to do change management, there's a swag of different techniques out there and a range of different change management practitioners of all persuasions. All in all, the various tools and techniques can probably work in any given sustainment context. I've applied Lean Six Sigma myself to a first principles review activity, but I've also been a participant in an ADCAR model. And from my experience, the ADCAR model for me was very much a standout approach to doing change management. And the reason being is it has very much a social focus and applies a social context to change. Unlike other models, which take more of an analytical and a procedural view of establishing change in an organisation. That social context is really key when it comes to getting feedback from your staff with regards to their satisfaction with the change and levels of uncertainty. But in particular, working external to the SPO across the industry and across to the capability manager, and understanding the perceptions of the change journey and putting that into a social context. And the ADCAR model is great because it provides you a number of subordinate tools that you can use to reinforce communication strategies, education strategies, and ongoing surveys to understand the climate that you're achieving in your organisation. Now, speaking of climate, the second opportunity for me is applying effort to empower industry to exhibit steward behaviours. And I really believe it's incumbent upon a SPO, a good SPO, to lead by example and to set the right conditions. And as I've said throughout this presentation, those conditions come from establishing the right structures, establishing the right management forums, but also putting industry in a place where they're empowered to make some bold decisions. And I think it's a good thing that the SPO allowing industry to be in an uncomfortable place from time to time and to actually learn, I guess, learn the ropes and learn the reactions of the capability manager and the SPO, if done in a controlled fashion, can be very, very good for industry. And it demonstrates trust in industry, and then that trust and that performance outcome only develops the relationship in a more positive light moving forward. I also believe that the SPO has big expectations in being bold with their statements for values and behaviours. And it's simply not, again, writing those into a contract, actually making bold public statements of expectation of behaviour that are to occur across the enterprise. So if I can use the P8 example, some values and behaviours statements were developed between the 3 parties and promoted across all elements of the enterprise in a very public fashion. And that was to put out there that this is the minimum expectation and that industry will be supported to deliver optimised outcomes for defence. With that, has anyone seen, as a question to those on the call, has anyone seen some examples where industry is not empowered by defence and some of the issues that can cause? I know Joanne sort of alluded to that example in an earlier response.
I'm happy to talk to that one. Coming from a position where I was a commercial manager within CASG, I think we often we like the idea of the platform stewardship, but we sometimes found it difficult to relinquish that accountability, as in allowing the contractor to make those stewardship decisions. And when you empower someone to make those stewardship type decisions, you need to step back and allow them to make the decision that you weren't necessarily going to make in the first place. So their decision might be a little bit different, and it's supporting that alternate view or alternate decision. It's not it's not being punitive when they don't do exactly what we would have expected to do ourselves.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they can actually create more creative solutions.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, Joanne. I've heard a similar approach to that type of situation explained previously, where we need to allow industry to fail safely. It sounds a bit harsh, but there are actually really good controls around governance. And when we say the token comment that we want to empower industry, we're absolutely right. We've got to, I think, step up to that and allow industry to make the decisions, even if they're not necessarily the first decision that Defence would make itself. Would that be a fair summation?
It is actually. I didn't want to say fail or, but you know, just making different decisions. I think we need to respect that if we allow industry to make the decisions, sometimes they come up with much more creative ways of addressing an issue than we would have with the constraints we have within Defence.
Yeah, fantastic. No, thanks very much for those comments, Joanne.
Dave, I've seen a contract. It wasn't a contract I was working on. I was just brought in really quickly as a reservist to have a look at a contract and develop some updated KPIs. And I think one of the reasons why the contract wasn't working, which thankfully had been recognised, was that the KPIs that were set were really unachievable. So I guess they'd been kind of established at a point where perhaps both industry partner and Defence didn't necessarily understand what it was that they were going to be measuring and how they were going to be measuring it. But I think the outcome was Defence kept holding them to these unrealistic KPIs that they wanted to achieve and said, well, you signed up to this. And it just really wasn't very productive on either side, I don't think, with trying to kind of hold that line. But the good thing was, I guess I was brought in to have a look at reframing the KPIs into things which were A, achievable, but B, perhaps a little bit more realistic too. So they hopefully moved on to a path that was better.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily. I've actually got some comments coming up around KPIs and contracts as well, so I'll try and complement what you've just said there as well. The third and second last opportunity is operationalizing platform product management. So I shown in a previous diagram having integrated management forums that enable the parties of the enterprise to come together and collaborate on decision making and to improve transparency across an enterprise. But when you look to apply contemporary asset management practices within the enterprise, that actually complements really nicely with the principles of planning, governance and assurance. My recommendation, where if you're going through this design journey, I would certainly recommend looking at developing your asset management program in conjunction with your enterprise forums that support the case model, because the two really come together and they overlap in so many areas. I have seen in the examples that I've been involved in where they've happened separately, but the synergies are incredibly obvious once you go through that development activity. There's certainly opportunities to not only make things more efficient, but CASG at the moment is about to roll out a significant push with integrated asset management across the domains. So catching that bow wave could be a good thing for many programs. And the fourth opportunity I'd like to address is integrated performance management. Now, Emily mentioned about an example where a contract had some quite restrictive and inappropriate KPIs that I assume were driving the wrong outcomes and the wrong behaviours. in this diagram here, I really want to spell out that the capability manager, we understand what they're focused on. They're focused on the outcome. It's ships at sea or planes in the air achieving a mission. But when it comes to a contract, the contract that supports the sustainment that is being delivered to that capability manager may not necessarily align. There may be some differences. So a fantastic initiative I saw on the P8 program when I was a part of that was taking key performance measures relevant to the capability manager and actually applying them to strategic level performance framework within the head contract for that sustainment program. And that ideal enabled industry and defence working collaboratively to build that contract to align the outcomes and the focus for the enterprise to that single goal, which is supporting the capability manager's needs. And everything that was subordinate to that really fed in and had a lot of synergy, and everything had a place. And that enabled CASG to speak a very common language with the capability manager, but also industry at the same time. So there was certainly an ability to reduce the confusion and the misconceptions about what is really important to our enterprise. Another opportunity there as well was removing at a working level, so at a product delivery schedule level or at an internal metrics level within industry that they may be using to monitor their performance, is removing key performance measures that have negative connotations. So remodeling historically relevant KPIs that are very much focused on delays or awaiting contractor action. There's very much a negative bias associated with identifying someone who is at fault. And blame attribution in an enterprise can have negative consequences if we're measuring someone or something to blame. So some careful work was done on P8 to remodel the product delivery schedule and the measures in the contract to remove a lot of those negative KPIs. And we were able to achieve the same outcome in terms of measuring the things that mattered, but in such a way that individuals or elements of the organisation were not unfairly put down or shone upon in a negative light. And that certainly, in my view, embraced and enhanced collaboration and increased the level of trust between those three parties in the enterprise. And at the end of the day, having those parties working together in a trustworthy manner is really key to seeing the benefits of sustainment come through for the customer. So to round out my presentation, I'd certainly like to open the floor to any final questions of anyone that they may wish to raise. I'd like to thank those who have asked questions throughout the forum this afternoon. I think there's some really good points that are being made, and I'm more than happy to take to questions after this call has finished as well. So for those who can't stay on the line, thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. But yeah, I'd like to open the floor to any further questions.
Thanks, Dave. This is Dan. That was really insightful for me. I've got a question. Currently working in the acquisition phase, what do you think is the low-hanging fruit? What could be done to help set up sustainment for success?
That's a really good question, Dan. Thanks for raising that. I think it's something that's forgotten, and when going through acquisition, that setting up the sustainment tail tends to be the last thing that's done or the afterthought. I can't see that the opportunities that I've presented for developing some methodical design work, and in particular, some methodical design work around developing the KPIs in the contract, and whether that contract has a strategic head agreement that sits above it. I think that's probably the best place to tackle first, because if you understand what the end game is and you're putting the right measures in place, then you can build your plan, govern and assure sustainment framework around that. And equally, industry can also come to the party through the ODIA activities as a part of contract negotiations to begin to understand the structures that they will need to build to support defence's outcomes.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Any other questions come through on the text line, Peter, before we round out this afternoon?
Not that I can see. Chris Nelms is always good for a thought-provoking question, though. I mean, I'm expecting something from him, so I'm sure it's just a matter of time. Look, otherwise, looks quite clear.
Excellent.
Which case, I'll probably take the opportunity then, spare Chris, and say thank you very much for the presentation there, Dave. It was excellent, nothing short of excellent, and really built on the stewardship presentation from April that Mick Wiggins led. Very grateful as a community that you were able to share those experiences, and particularly I like the 6 challenges that you articulated and the 4 opportunities that exist there. I have no idea what the AgCar model is, so I've got homework there for that. I guess it's a final opportunity if there's any questions before I'll start the advertisements for the next session.
I have no questions, but Dave, thanks from me. And I guess I think you had quite a few gems in there. So I'm definitely going to go back and rewatch, because things like being bold on behaviour expectations and the fact that organisational reform is the byproduct of change management, just spot on. Thanks, Dave.
No worries. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Peter.
All right, well, and thank you to our 26, 27 odd folk that jumped on the line today to listen in. We run these on a monthly basis. As I said at the outset, the intent here is to really reinvest the qualification, training and experience of our staff in a informal setting where we can share experiences back to the defence community, because with the amount of work that the enterprise has in front of us over the next 5 to 10 years, we need to ensure that we're not going back and relearning the lessons of the past. So thanks very much for coming along, and our next presentation will be in August. You'll need to keep tuned into LinkedIn for the exact details of what that topic will be. My understanding is it could be Dave Jarrett presenting on something related to test and evaluation. He's he's a senior flight test engineer at MAFTU on 2 separate postings, and I think he might be in the gun to be able to do the next one. So thanks again. Have a great night, and we look forward to seeing you in August.
Thanks very much, Peter. Thank you, everyone.